The world goes quiet. The lights are off. Your phone is finally face down. There's nothing left to do. And somehow, that's exactly when your brain decides to wake up. One thought becomes another. You replay something you said 3 years ago. You imagine tomorrow's conversation before it even happens. You remember a mistake you thought you'd forgotten. Then you start wondering whether the people around you secretly see you differently than you see yourself. Minutes turn into hours. Your body is lying in bed, but your mind is running a marathon. You've probably wished, at least once, that someone could press a button and make your thoughts disappear. Because living like this is exhausting. It feels like your own mind has become a room you can't leave. Most people call this overthinking. They tell you to stop, relax, think positive, go outside, meditate. Get busy, as if your brain has an off switch that you somehow forgot to use. But here's something strange. If stopping were that easy, you would have done it years ago. So maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the question isn't, how do I stop overthinking? Maybe it's, why does my brain work this way in the first place? Because your brain isn't random. It isn't broken. And despite what you've been told, it isn't trying to ruin your life. In fact, it may be trying to protect you. Just not in the way you think. Imagine you're standing in front of two identical doors. Behind one door is complete certainty. Behind the other is uncertainty. Which one do you choose? Almost everyone says certainty. Your brain would choose it too, every single time. Not because certainty always leads to happiness, because certainty feels safe. Your brain values survival more than comfort. It always has. Thousands of years ago, uncertainty could get you killed. If your ancestors ignored strange sounds in the bushes, they didn't become your ancestors. The humans who survived weren't always the strongest. They were often the ones who imagined danger before it arrived. They asked, what if something's hiding over there? What if this person can't be trusted? What if I shouldn't eat this? Those people lived long enough to pass their brains on to us. Which means, your anxious mind isn't a design flaw. It's ancient software, running perfectly, in a world it wasn't designed for. Because today, the lion isn't hiding in the bushes. The lion is your unread email, your job interview, your bank account, your relationship, your future, your reputation. A text message that simply says, "Can we talk?" Objectively, none of these things can chase you through the forest. Yet your body reacts as if they can. Your heart speeds up, your breathing changes, your muscles tighten, your stomach feels heavy. Not because danger is real, because your brain believes it might become real. That's enough. And that's where overthinking begins. Not with weakness, not with a lack of confidence, but with prediction. Your brain is constantly asking one question, what's about to happen? It's the most important job your brain has. Every second, it's making predictions. When you catch a ball, your brain predicted where it would land. When you finish someone else's sentence, your brain predicted what they were going to say. When you walk downstairs without looking at every step, your brain predicts where your foot should go. Prediction keeps you alive. But prediction has a dark side. When your brain doesn't know what's going to happen, it starts creating possibilities. Lots of them. Some realistic, some ridiculous, some terrifying. And here's the strange part. Your brain doesn't care whether those possibilities are true. It only cares that you're prepared. Preparation feels like protection, even when it isn't. That's why you replay conversations after they're over. You think, maybe I should have said this instead. Not because changing the past is possible, but because your brain wants to be more prepared next time. That's why you imagine worst-case scenarios before important events. Not because you enjoy suffering, but because your brain believes, if I imagine it first, it won't hurt as much if it happens. It sounds logical, except it rarely works. Instead of protecting you from pain, your imagination makes you experience the pain twice. Once in your mind, then again in real life if it actually happens. Sometimes, it never happens at all. but your body still paid the price. Think about that. Your heart has raced over problems that never existed. You've lost sleep over conversations that never happened. You've felt guilty for mistakes nobody remembers. You've apologized for things that weren't your fault. Not because reality demanded it, because your imagination convinced you it might. That's how powerful your mind is. But here's what most people never realize. The same imagination that creates fear also creates art, innovation, compassion, discovery. Every invention began as a thought that didn't exist in reality. Every beautiful novel existed in someone's imagination before it existed on paper. Every scientific breakthrough started with someone asking, "What if?" The same mental engine that creates anxiety creates genius. The engine isn't the problem. The direction is. Imagine owning the world's fastest sports car. If nobody teaches you how to drive, that speed becomes dangerous. You don't blame the engine. You learn how to control it. Your brain works the same way. A powerful mind without direction feels like chaos. A powerful mind with direction changes lives, including your own. But before you can learn to guide your thoughts, you have to understand one uncomfortable truth. Overthinking isn't just something you do. For many people, it's become part of who they believe they are. I'm just an overthinker. That's how I've always been. I can't help it. The more you repeat those sentences, the more your brain accepts them as facts. Psychologists have spent decades studying this phenomenon. The stories you tell yourself become mental shortcuts. Eventually, your brain stops questioning them. If you keep telling yourself you're bad at public speaking, your brain starts collecting evidence to prove it. If you tell yourself people always leave, your brain becomes hyper-aware of every small sign of rejection. It ignores everything that doesn't fit the story. Not because it's lying to you, because that's how attention works. You don't see reality exactly as it is. You see the reality your brain has been trained to notice, which means something incredible. If your attention can be trained toward fear, it can also be trained toward understanding. And that changes everything, because over the next hour, you're going to discover that overthinking isn't one single habit. It's a collection of invisible patterns. Some were built in childhood. Some came from painful experiences. Some were created by the modern world itself. And almost all of them can be changed. Not overnight, not with positive thinking, not with empty motivation, but by understanding what your mind has been trying to do for you all along. Because once you understand the purpose behind your thoughts, they stop feeling like enemies. They become clues. And the first clue leads to a question that almost nobody asks. What's the difference between a person who thinks deeply and a person who simply can't stop thinking? The strange thing about overthinking is that it looks intelligent from the outside. You're always analyzing, always asking questions, always trying to understand. People might even call you thoughtful, careful, wise. But inside your own head, it doesn't feel wise. It feels exhausting. Because no matter how much you think, it never seems to be enough. One answer creates another question. One solution creates another problem. It's like trying to drink salt water. The more you consume, the thirstier you become. That's because there are actually two very different kinds of thinking. Almost everyone confuses them. One builds your life. The other quietly steals it. Imagine standing at the edge of a lake. The surface is perfectly still. When you look down, you can see all the way to the bottom. Every rock, every fish, every tiny detail. That's what deep thinking feels like. Your attention settles. Your mind becomes curious. You're exploring an idea because you genuinely want to understand it. Now imagine the same lake during a storm. The water is constantly moving. The waves never stop. You can't see anything beneath the surface. Not because there's nothing there, but because the movement itself blocks your vision. That's overthinking. Your thoughts are moving so fast that clarity becomes impossible. The problem isn't a lack of intelligence. It's too much mental noise. Here's something psychologists have discovered. When people are deeply focused on solving a meaningful problem, different parts of the brain work together. Logic, memory, creativity, attention. It's almost like an orchestra playing in harmony. But when someone starts ruminating, the pattern changes. Instead of moving toward an answer, the brain begins replaying the same emotional loops. Different words, same fear, different scenario, same uncertainty. You aren't creating new understanding. You're recycling old emotions. That's why you can think about the same problem for 6 hours and still end the day exactly where you started. The brain mistakes repetition for progress. It feels like you're working. In reality, you're walking in circles. Think about Google Maps. If you're driving somewhere new, the app constantly updates your route. It responds to reality. Now imagine a GPS that refuses to look outside. Instead, it keeps calculating the same road over and over. No matter where you actually drive, it keeps saying, recalculating. That's what overthinking does. Instead of using new information, it keeps recalculating old fears. No wonder you feel stuck. One of the biggest myths about overthinkers is that they think too much. That's not actually true. They often think about too little. Not too little in quantity, too little in variety. They return to the same 3 or 4 fears. Again, again, again. Almost like a playlist on repeat. What if I fail? What if they reject me? What if I'm not enough? What if I regret this? Different situations, same soundtrack. Your brain changes the scenery. The story stays the same. There's a reason this happens. The brain loves familiarity. Even painful thoughts become comfortable if you've repeated them long enough. Scientists sometimes summarize this with a simple idea. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Every time you think the same thought, that pathway becomes a little stronger. Imagine walking across a field. The first time, you have to push through tall grass. The 10th time, a small trail appears. After 100 walks, there's a clear path. Your thoughts work exactly the same way. Every repeated fear becomes easier to think tomorrow. Not because it's true, because it's familiar, and your brain mistakes familiar for safe. This explains something many people never understand about themselves. Why do you sometimes expect the worst, even when life is going well? Because your brain isn't asking, is this true? It's asking, have I been here before? If the answer is yes, it follows the old path automatically. That's why someone who grew up with constant criticism can receive 10 compliments and still remember the one negative comment. Their brain already has a highway built toward criticism. Praise still has to travel through the grass. But here's the beautiful part. Roads can be rebuilt. Not in a day. Not with fake positivity. With repetition. Every time you challenge an old belief, you step onto new ground. Every time you choose action instead of endless analysis, the new path becomes slightly easier. Tiny changes, repeated consistently, eventually become completely different ways of thinking. This is exactly why people often say, I don't even recognize the person I used to be. Their personality didn't magically change. Their mental pathways did. Now here's a question. If overthinking isn't actually helping, why does your brain keep doing it? Because it believes it's protecting you. Imagine a smoke alarm that goes off every time you make toast. Annoying? Absolutely. Broken? Not necessarily. It's simply too sensitive. Your anxious mind works the same way. It would rather warn you 100 unnecessary times than miss one real danger. From your brain's perspective, that's a good deal. From your perspective, it's exhausting. And yet, that same sensitivity is also the reason you notice things other people miss. Tiny changes in someone's mood, small details, hidden patterns, future consequences. Your brain is incredibly good at connecting dots. The challenge isn't becoming less sensitive, it's learning which dots deserve to be connected. Because not every coincidence is a warning. Not every silence is rejection. Not every mistake predicts failure. Sometimes, a missed text is just a missed text. A bad day is just a bad day. A wrong decision is simply part of becoming wiser. The people who seem mentally peaceful aren't necessarily thinking less. They're filtering better. They've learned that every thought doesn't deserve a meeting. Some thoughts deserve attention. Others deserve a smile and a quiet goodbye. That skill changes everything. Because your life isn't shaped by every thought you have. It's shaped by the thoughts you choose to believe. And that leads to another surprising discovery. If your mind learned these patterns over years, where did it learn them first? The answer begins long before your first job, your first relationship, or your first big failure. It begins in childhood, where your inner voice was quietly being written long before you even knew you had one. There's a moment almost every overthinker remembers. You walk away from a conversation, and 5 minutes later, your brain starts rewriting it. Why did I say that? I should have explained myself better. Maybe they thought I was rude. Maybe I talked too much. Maybe I didn't say enough. The conversation is over. The other person has probably moved on with their day, but your mind hasn't. It keeps replaying the same scene, searching for something it missed. It's almost like your brain believes the past is still negotiable, as if one more hour of thinking might somehow change what already happened. But the past doesn't change. Only your relationship with it does. Imagine watching the same movie every night. The ending never changes. The characters never change. The dialogue never changes. Yet every night, you hope this time it will somehow be different. Sounds ridiculous. Yet that's exactly what overthinking does. It convinces you that another replay will finally bring peace. Instead, it usually creates more questions, not more answers. Psychologists call this rumination. It's different from reflection. Reflection asks, what can I learn? Rumination asks, why did this happen to me? Reflection has an exit. Rumination keeps building another room inside the maze. That's why you can spend an entire evening thinking, and somehow end up more confused than when you started. Here's something fascinating. Your brain stores emotional memories differently than ordinary memories. If an experience made you feel embarrassed, rejected, or ashamed, your brain places a bright mental bookmark on it. Not because it wants you to suffer, because it doesn't want you to repeat it. From your brain's perspective, pain is valuable information. The stronger the emotion, the stronger the memory. That's why you probably remember one embarrassing moment from middle school, but can't remember what you had for lunch 3 Tuesdays ago. Emotion tells the brain, this matters. The problem is, your brain doesn't know the difference between useful pain and outdated pain, so it keeps reopening old files, just in case there's still something to learn. Think of your mind as a librarian. Every experience becomes a book. Most books get placed neatly on a shelf, but painful memories stay on the front desk. Your brain keeps picking them up, reading them again, looking for a sentence it somehow missed. The words never change. Only your exhaustion grows. This is one reason perfectionists often become overthinkers. Perfection isn't really about being perfect. It's about avoiding future regret. If everything is flawless, maybe nobody can criticize you. Maybe nobody can reject you. Maybe you'll finally feel safe. But life doesn't reward perfection. Life rewards adaptation. A tree survives storms not because it's rigid, but because it bends. Ironically, the stronger something refuses to move, the easier it breaks. There's another reason your brain keeps replaying the past. It believes understanding equals control. If you can fully understand why something happened, then maybe you can prevent it from happening again. Sometimes that's true, but many events in life have no satisfying explanation. People leave. Opportunities disappear. Mistakes happen. Good people get hurt. Not every story has a clean ending, yet your brain keeps searching anyway, like trying to finish a puzzle with missing pieces. What most people don't realize is that healing doesn't always come from finding the perfect explanation. Sometimes healing begins when you accept that no explanation will ever feel complete. That sounds uncomfortable. Because it is. Human beings naturally crave certainty. But emotional freedom often begins where certainty ends. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with rocks. Every painful memory becomes another stone. At first, you barely notice. Years pass. You adapt to the weight. Eventually, it feels normal. Then one day someone asks, "Why do you seem so tired all the time?" You don't know how to answer, because you've forgotten what it feels like to walk without carrying the past. The goal isn't pretending those rocks never existed. The goal is realizing you don't have to carry every single one forever. Some lessons can stay without the pain staying too. This is where everything begins to shift. The strongest people aren't the ones who never look back. They're the ones who know when to stop. They ask, "Did I learn what I needed?" If the answer is yes, they close the book. Not because it never mattered, because they've already taken the lesson. And lessons don't need to be carried forever. Here's the surprising part. The same brain that replays painful memories also has an incredible ability. It notices details that most people completely overlook. Tiny patterns, subtle emotions, small changes, invisible connections. The very thing that sometimes makes life exhausting can also become one of your greatest strengths. The question is, how do you stop your mind from searching for danger and start teaching it to search for possibility instead? Because that's where your gift has been hiding all along. There's a reason people call some people observant. They walk into a room and immediately notice that someone is quieter than usual. They hear a sentence and recognize what wasn't said. They can almost feel the emotional atmosphere before anyone speaks. If you're an overthinker, there's a good chance you've experienced this. You notice tiny details that other people completely miss. A slight change in someone's voice. A smile that doesn't reach their eyes. A pause that lasts 1 second longer than usual. A message with one less emoji than yesterday. To most people, these details disappear. To your brain, they become clues. The strange part is that this ability isn't imaginary. Psychologists have found that some people naturally process far more information from their environment than others. Their brains are constantly scanning for patterns. It's almost like living with your senses turned up just a little higher. Imagine walking into a room where music is playing softly. Most people hear the melody. You hear the melody, the bass, the piano, the background conversation, the air conditioner, and someone's foot tapping against the floor. Your brain doesn't filter information as aggressively. It notices more. And that's both the blessing and the burden. Think about detectives. The best detectives don't solve cases because they're lucky. They notice details everyone else ignores. A coffee cup moved 2 inches, a picture frame hanging slightly crooked, mud on someone's shoes. Individually, these details mean nothing. Together, they tell a story. Your brain works in a similar way. It's constantly collecting tiny pieces of information, trying to understand the bigger picture. That's an incredible skill, until it starts creating stories that aren't actually there. Imagine looking up at the night sky. There are thousands of stars. Your brain begins connecting them into shapes. A hunter, a lion, a dragon. The stars are real. The pattern is something your mind created. That's exactly how overthinking works. The facts might be real. The meaning you attach to them is often a guess. Your friend replies with one word. Fact. They're angry with you. Story. Your boss asks to see you tomorrow. Fact. You're about to lose your job. Story. Someone walks past without saying hello. Fact. They secretly dislike you. Story. Your brain is a storyteller, not a fortune teller. The problem begins when you confuse one for the other. There's a reason this happens. The human brain evolved to find patterns because pattern recognition kept us alive. If your ancestors noticed that dark clouds were usually followed by rain, they survived. If they noticed certain berries made people sick, they survived. If they noticed dangerous animals left certain tracks, they survived. Pattern recognition is one of humanity's greatest superpowers. But your brain has another plan. It would rather find a pattern that doesn't exist than miss one that does. Because from an evolutionary perspective, a false alarm is cheaper than a missed threat. That's why you sometimes see danger where there isn't any. Your brain isn't trying to make you anxious. It's trying to keep you alive. The problem is, your survival system doesn't always understand modern life. It still treats emotional uncertainty like physical danger. Think about social media. You upload a photo. An hour later, it has fewer likes than usual. Most people shrug and continue their day. An overthinker's brain begins investigating. Did I post at the wrong time? Do people find me boring now? Did I offend someone? Is the algorithm against me? Notice what happened? A simple observation became an investigation. Then, an investigation became a personal story. The event lasted a few seconds. The meaning lasted all day. Here's something fascinating. Studies on highly sensitive individuals suggest that many of them process emotional and environmental information more deeply than average. That doesn't automatically make life harder. In the right environment, it often becomes a tremendous advantage. These people tend to notice beauty others overlook. They appreciate music more deeply. They recognize emotional shifts earlier. They often become exceptional artists. Writers, teachers, therapists, leaders, and creators. Why? Because they don't just look. They observe. They don't just hear. They listen. They don't just meet people. They notice people. The very trait that once felt like a curse becomes the foundation of extraordinary empathy, but only when it's directed wisely. Imagine holding a flashlight. If you point it only at danger, everything looks frightening. If you point it toward opportunity, you begin seeing possibilities everywhere. The flashlight never changed. Only its direction did. Your attention works exactly the same way. Most overthinkers have spent years training their minds to scan for problems. Almost nobody teaches them how to scan for beauty, progress, or possibility. Yet the brain learns whatever you repeatedly ask it to notice. Ask, "What's wrong with me?" And your brain becomes an expert at finding flaws. Ask, "What did I handle well today?" And your brain slowly begins collecting evidence of growth instead. The question acts like a compass. Your attention follows it. This is where everything changes. Your gift isn't that you notice more. Your gift is that you have the ability to choose what you notice. That choice isn't easy. It takes practice. But every day you strengthen it, your mind becomes a little less like an alarm system and a little more like a guide. And once you begin noticing people more deeply, another challenge appears. Because when you can feel what others are feeling, it's surprisingly easy to forget where their emotions end and yours begin. That's why so many overthinkers eventually find themselves carrying emotional weight that was never theirs to carry. There are people who can walk into a room filled with tension and never notice it. Then there are people who feel the tension before anyone speaks. If you're an overthinker, you probably know exactly what that feels like. Someone sighs. Your stomach tightens. Someone answers with a shorter message than usual. Your mind starts searching for a reason. A friend says, "I'm fine," but something in their voice tells you they aren't. Most people hear the words. You hear everything around the words. At first, this feels like a gift. Sometimes, it really is. You become the friend everyone talks to. The one who notices when someone is hurting before they admit it. The one who remembers the small details. The one who senses when something feels off. People often describe you as caring, thoughtful, understanding. But here's the strange part. Nobody sees what it costs you. Imagine walking through life carrying an invisible backpack. Every time someone you love feels anxious, another stone drops inside. Every time a friend is heartbroken, another stone. A family member is stressed, another stone. Your partner has a bad day, another stone. At first, the weight seems manageable. Then one morning you wake up feeling emotionally exhausted. Not because your own life is falling apart, but because you've been carrying pieces of everyone else's. and you didn't even notice when it started. Psychologists call this emotional contagion. Human emotions are surprisingly contagious. Spend enough time around someone who's constantly laughing, and you'll probably smile more. Spend enough time around someone who's deeply anxious, and your own nervous system begins responding. Your brain is wired for connection. Inside your brain are special cells often called mirror neurons. They're part of the reason you instinctively smile when someone smiles, why you wince when you see someone fall, why watching someone cry can make your own eyes fill with tears. Your brain doesn't just observe emotion. It rehearses it. It experiences a version of it. That's one reason empathy feels so real. But your brain has another plan. Sometimes it forgets the difference between understanding someone else's pain and adopting it as your own. That's where empathy quietly turns into emotional exhaustion. Imagine standing in the rain beside someone you love. You want to comfort them, so you hand them your umbrella. That's empathy. Now imagine throwing your umbrella away and standing in the storm with them until both of you are soaked. That isn't compassion. That's self-neglect. Many overthinkers confuse the two. They believe love means carrying another person's emotional weight. They believe saying no makes them selfish. They believe protecting their own peace means they've failed someone else. But here's the truth. You can't rescue someone from drowning if you've forgotten how to swim yourself. Think about a phone battery. Every conversation, every worry, every emotional burden drains a little more energy. Most people recharge by resting. Overthinkers often recharge by thinking. They replay conversations, analyze problems, wonder whether everyone else is okay. Their body is resting. Their brain is still working overtime. Imagine leaving every app open on your phone. Eventually, the battery dies. Not because you used one app too much, because you never closed any of them. Your mind works the same way. Every unfinished emotional story stays open in the background, quietly using energy, until one day, you feel tired for no obvious reason. Here's something fascinating. Research shows that people with high empathy often experience stronger emotional responses because they naturally simulate what others are feeling. That's a beautiful ability. It helps create trust, deep friendships, meaningful relationships. But without healthy boundaries, that same gift becomes overwhelming. Imagine a sponge placed in water. A sponge is supposed to absorb. That's what it was made for. But if nobody squeezes the water back out, eventually the sponge becomes too heavy to lift. Many overthinkers spend years absorbing, without ever releasing. What most people don't realize is that compassion doesn't require self-sacrifice. A doctor can care deeply about a patient without becoming sick. A firefighter can rescue people without running into every burning building without protection. Strength isn't refusing to care. Strength is caring wisely. This changes the way you see relationships. You stop asking, "How do I fix everyone?" And you begin asking, "How can I support them without losing myself?" That's a completely different question. One leads to burnout. The other leads to lasting connection. Here's a small exercise. The next time someone shares a problem with you, pause for a moment afterward. Ask yourself, is this emotion mine? Most people never ask that question because they assume every feeling inside them belongs there. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you're carrying someone else's fear, someone else's anger, someone else's disappointment. Simply noticing that creates space. And in that space, your nervous system can finally breathe. But empathy isn't the only reason overthinkers become exhausted. There's another trap that's even more invisible. A trap that convinces intelligent people that nothing they do is ever quite good enough. It's the voice that whispers, "One more edit, one more improvement, one more day." It sounds like ambition. It feels like responsibility. But underneath it, it's something much deeper. Perfection. And almost nobody realizes how quietly perfectionism steals years of their lives. There's a sentence many overthinkers never say out loud, but they hear it every single day. It's not good enough. Not good enough. The presentation could be better. The email could be rewritten. The video could be edited one more time. The business idea needs more research. The workout should have been longer. The conversation should have gone differently. Even after success, your brain finds something that could have been improved. You don't celebrate, you evaluate. And before you know it, you're already chasing the next impossible standard. Here's the strange part. From the outside, people admire you. They see someone who's disciplined, careful, responsible, someone who pays attention to details, but they never see the battle happening behind the scenes. They don't see the project you almost never published, the opportunity you almost accepted, the relationship you almost started, the dream you almost pursued, because almost felt safer than imperfect. Imagine a sculptor standing in front of a block of marble. Day after day, they keep polishing, smoothing, correcting, adding tiny improvements. Visitors tell them, "It's beautiful." But the sculptor only sees flaws. One more adjustment, one more correction, one more week. Years pass. The masterpiece never leaves the studio. Not because it wasn't good enough, because it was never allowed to be finished. Perfectionism doesn't always ruin quality. Sometimes it prevents completion. Psychologists have noticed something interesting. People often believe perfectionists are driven by excellence. That's only half the story. Many perfectionists aren't chasing success. They're running away from failure. Those sound similar. They're completely different. A person chasing excellence asks, "How can I improve?" A perfectionist asks, "How can I avoid making a mistake?" One question creates curiosity. The other creates fear. There's a reason this happens. Your brain remembers emotional pain far more vividly than emotional comfort. If you've ever been embarrassed, criticized, laughed at, or made to feel like your best wasn't enough, your brain quietly stores a lesson. Don't let that happen again. At first, that lesson protects you. You prepare more. You work harder. You pay attention to details. Those habits can lead to success. But then something changes. The goal stops being growth. The goal becomes avoiding shame. That's when perfection quietly becomes a prison. Think about learning to walk. Imagine if babies refused to take a step until they were certain they would never fall. None of us would ever learn. Falling isn't evidence that you're failing. It's evidence that you're learning. Somewhere along the way, many adults forget that. They begin believing every mistake is a verdict on who they are. Instead of seeing failure as information, they see it as identity. "I failed" becomes "I am a failure." One word changes everything. Your brain loves certainty. Perfection promises certainty. It whispers, if everything is flawless, nobody can criticize you. Nobody can reject you. Nobody can leave. But that's a lie. No amount of perfection guarantees acceptance. History proves it. Some of the greatest artists were criticized. Some of the greatest inventors were mocked. Some of the greatest leaders were misunderstood. Perfection never protected them. Persistence did. Imagine carrying a glass vase everywhere you go. You're terrified of dropping it. So you stop running. Then you stop exploring. Eventually, you stop living. Not because the vase broke, because protecting it became your entire life. Many people treat their reputation exactly like that vase. They're so afraid of making one mistake, they never give themselves permission to grow. But growth has always been messy. A forest doesn't apologize for fallen leaves. The ocean doesn't apologize for rough waves. Nature never confuses imperfection with failure. Only humans do. Here's something fascinating. Researchers studying creativity discovered that highly creative people often produce a huge number of bad ideas. Not because they're less talented, because they aren't afraid to create imperfectly. For every masterpiece, there are dozens of forgotten drafts. Every successful author has written pages nobody will ever read. Every great musician has created songs nobody will ever hear. Every entrepreneur has made decisions that failed. The difference isn't that they avoid mistakes. The difference is that they don't stop because of them. What most people don't realize is that perfectionism and procrastination are often best friends. You tell yourself you're waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect opportunity, the perfect version of yourself. Months become years. Meanwhile, someone with half your talent but twice your willingness to begin quietly passes you, not because they're smarter, because they're moving. Life rewards movement, not endless preparation. Think about an archer aiming at a target. If they spend their entire life adjusting the arrow, they never discover whether they could hit the target. Eventually, the greatest risk isn't missing. It's never releasing the arrow at all. This is where everything changes. Confidence doesn't grow from getting everything right. Confidence grows from surviving the moments you got wrong. Every mistake your brain desperately wants you to avoid contains information your future self desperately needs. That's the paradox. The lessons that build your confidence almost always arrive disguised as failure. And once you understand that, another invisible habit suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. Because if perfectionism traps you before you act, your brain has another strategy that keeps you stuck even after you've started. It constantly tries to predict the future, as if thinking hard enough today could somehow control tomorrow. Imagine carrying a flashlight your entire life, without realizing it was pointed in the wrong direction. Everywhere you looked, you found reasons to worry, reasons to hesitate, reasons to doubt yourself. So eventually, you came to one painful conclusion. My mind is the problem. But after everything we've uncovered together, maybe that's never been true. Maybe your mind has never been trying to hurt you. Maybe it has been trying, sometimes clumsily, sometimes excessively, to protect the person it loves most. You. Think about everything your mind has done. It noticed details other people ignored. It imagined possibilities before they happened. It searched for patterns. It tried to prevent pain. It remembered mistakes so you wouldn't repeat them. It questioned your decisions because it wanted the best future for you. None of those abilities are bad. In fact, they're some of the most extraordinary abilities a human brain can have. The problem was never the engine. The problem was that nobody ever handed you the map. Imagine giving a Formula One car to someone who's never learned to drive. The speed becomes terrifying. Every turn feels dangerous. Every mistake feels catastrophic. Eventually, they begin believing the car is broken. But it was never the car. It was the lack of direction. Your mind is no different. The same imagination that kept you awake at night can build businesses. Write books. Create art. Solve impossible problems. Understand people on a level few ever will. The same sensitivity that made you absorb everyone's emotions can become deep compassion. The same curiosity that kept asking, "What if everything goes wrong?" can one day begin asking, "What if everything works out better than I imagined?" That single change doesn't alter your intelligence. It changes the direction of it. Here's something beautiful about the human brain. It never stops changing. No matter how many years you've spent overthinking, your brain is still learning. Every thought you question, every fear you refuse to feed, every small action you take despite uncertainty is teaching your brain a new story. Not overnight, not all at once, but quietly. The way rivers shape mountains. One drop at a time, one decision at a time, one day at a time. People often wait for one dramatic breakthrough. One magical morning where anxiety disappears forever. Life rarely works that way. Real transformation is almost invisible while it's happening. It's choosing to send the message instead of rewriting it 20 times. It's making the decision even though certainty never arrived. It's allowing yourself to be misunderstood sometimes. It's forgiving yourself for being human. It's going to sleep without solving every problem your mind invented. Those moments seem small, but they're how new identities are built. One day, you'll notice something strange. the conversation in your head becomes quieter, not silent, just kinder. You'll still think deeply. You'll still notice things other people miss. You'll still ask meaningful questions. But you won't believe every fearful thought that asks for your attention. You'll realize something incredibly freeing. A thought is not a command. A feeling is not a prediction. Fear is not a prophecy. And uncertainty is not your enemy. It's simply the price of living a meaningful life. If you wait until you're completely certain, you'll wait forever. If you wait until you're fearless, you'll never begin. The people you admire weren't born with quieter minds. They simply stopped asking their minds for permission to live. They learned to carry uncertainty with courage. And that's a skill available to every single one of us, including you. So maybe your overthinking was never the enemy. Maybe it was an untamed gift. A powerful mind searching for direction. A brilliant imagination searching for purpose. A heart trying a little too hard to protect itself. And now, you finally know what to do with it. The next time your mind starts racing, don't ask, "How do I stop thinking?" Ask, "Where is this thought trying to take me?" If it leads toward understanding, follow it. If it leads only toward fear, thank it for trying to protect you, and let it pass. Because your life will never be defined by how many thoughts you have. It will be defined by which ones you choose to follow. Your greatest strength was never your ability to think more than everyone else. It was your ability to grow beyond the thoughts that once controlled you. And maybe, years from now, you'll look back at the person watching this video today, the one who believed their own mind was their biggest obstacle, and you'll smile. Not because life became perfect, but because you finally realized the gift was never overthinking. The gift was becoming the person who learned how to guide it. If this changed how you see your own mind, the next story may change your life even more.